From the time I was 11 until I was 14, my best friend was a guy named Spencer. We hung out practically non-stop outside of school, and during the summer, I practically lived at his house. Spencer had an older brother named Keenan who was 5 years older than us. To a pair of 13-year-old boys, Keenan hung the moon. He was the epitome of cool. He played guitar, listened to incredible music, and we always wanted to be around him. One summer, Keenan went away to an adventure camp to visit the Grand Canyon and go whitewater rafting. We were incredibly jealous. The house felt empty without him, and we counted down the days until Spencer's dad drove to the airport to pick him up. When the truck finally pulled into the driveway, Spencer and I ran downstairs to greet them. But when the car door opened, Keenan wasn't there. Spencer's dad stepped out with tears streaming down his face and choked out, "He didn't make it. He didn't make it, you guys." My heart dropped straight into my stomach. Panic seized me. Then, a second later, Keenan stepped out from behind his dad, and both of them burst out laughing. It was a massive, cruel dick move. Once our hearts stopped racing, we helped him unload his luggage and stayed up until midnight, listening to his stories. He talked about almost flipping his raft and how he surely would have drowned if he had gone overboard. We were completely enamored. Before heading to bed, Keenan smiled and told us he'd tell us the rest in the morning. A few hours later, I jolted awake in a cold sweat. I had just experienced a terrifying, hyper-vivid nightmare. In the dream, our entire day had played out exactly the same way, except when Spencer's dad made the joke about Keenan dying. It wasn't a joke. Keenan actually was dead. Shaken and trembling, I decided to tiptoe to the kitchen to grab a glass of water to calm down. I checked my phone. It was exactly 3:30 a.m. and the house was pitch black. As I walked through the den, the only light came from the pale moonlight spilling into the living room. That's when I froze. In the center of the room, cutting through the moonlight, was a large, still silhouette. As my eyes adjusted, my breathing stopped. It looked exactly like Keenan hanging directly from the ceiling fan. Terrified, I broke into a dead sprint across the room and slammed the light switch on, praying my eyes were deceiving me. The light flooded the room. It was Keenan, except he wasn't hanging. He was standing perfectly upright on his own 2 feet, directly underneath the fan, with one of his arms raised straight up over his head, reaching into the air. Before I could even scream, his eyes blinked and he snapped out of it. He looked around the room, completely confused, and noticed me shaking. He lowered his arm, rubbed his eyes, and calmly said, "Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you guys. I guess I developed a bit of a sleepwalking habit at camp." I used to work as a summer camp counselor. It was the very last session of the summer, and I was assigned to one of the rustic cabins that used a simple canvas flap for a front door. None of the cabins at this camp had built-in plumbing. We all relied on a centralized bathhouse for the toilet and showers. The building was about 20 to 30 yards away, a decent walk in the pitch black, but you could see its structure clearly through the screen of the cabin's back door. On the second night of the session, well, after all the campers had drifted off to sleep, I woke up in the dead of night. Through the darkness of the cabin, I saw a figure slowly rise from one of the bunks. Assuming it was just a camper needing a midnight trip to the bathhouse, I stayed quiet and watched. The figure moved with an unsettling, agonizingly slow pace toward the back door, and then he stopped. Dead stop. He was perfectly silhouetted against the pale moonlight, filtering through the screen. For 10 agonizing minutes, this figure just stood there, completely frozen, staring out into the dark woods. Finally, the silhouette turned around, cast a long look back toward the front canvas door, and walked slowly back to his bed. As he climbed back under the covers, I realized it wasn't a camper. It was my junior counselor's bunk. Reassured that it was just him, I drifted back to sleep. The next morning, I noticed my junior counselor looked completely sleep-deprived, staring into space with a completely blank, hollow expression. I walked over to confront him about his weird behavior from the night before. The second I asked him why he was standing at the back door, staring into the woods for 10 minutes, his face drained of all color. Without saying a single word, he turned round and burst into a full sprint out of the cabin. I chased him down across the campground, and when I finally caught up to him, he was trembling. He looked at me and explained that he had been awake, but the story was completely reversed. He told me that he had woken up, looked across the cabin, and watched me get out of bed, walk slowly to the front canvas door, and stand there staring out into the dark for 10 minutes before looking back at him and crawling into bed. We had both watched the exact same terrifying entity, masked as the other person, standing at opposite ends of the cabin. I never went back to that camp, and I haven't heard a single word from that JC since. Spent 7 years of my youth attending a summer camp that I absolutely adored. Like any old campground, we had our fair share of ghost stories told around the fire, but most of them were entirely fake, except for one. Back in the 1970s, a young girl actually died on the property. I know this for a fact because, as a parting gift on my final night, I was shown the official camp records. She had been complaining of severe headaches all week, and during a soccer game, her heart gave out. She collapsed and passed away right in the basement of the main lodge. Her defining trait was a bright yellow raincoat that she wore everywhere. Over the decades, countless staff members claimed to see a little girl in a yellow raincoat sitting on the steps of her old cabin, crying in the dark. As the years went by, I eventually moved on and headed off to a college in a completely different state, a full 7 hours away from that campground. I forgot all about the legend, occasionally treating it as just a spooky campfire tale to tell new friends. While at school, I fell into a friend group with someone who was highly intuitive and deeply in tune with the paranormal. One night, completely out of the blue, she began to distinctly and accurately describe the appearance of a little girl and the exact layout of my childhood summer camp. I had never told her a single detail about that place or the legend. My friend looked at me solemnly and told me that the spirit of the little girl in the yellow raincoat had attached herself to me. My only assumption is that by telling her story over the years, I was inadvertently keeping her memory alive. I know her real name from the records, but out of respect, I will never speak it out loud. For over a year after that revelation, I began seeing her. She would suddenly appear at night, standing in my bathroom or lurking in the corners of my room, just silently observing. It never felt inherently evil or negative, but it wasn't positive either. It was just a heavy, hollow presence, and eventually I simply got used to it. This past year, I moved into a brand new house and realized I hadn't seen her in a very long time. I thought the attachment had finally broken until the other night. After a long evening out, I suddenly jolted awake in bed. I checked the time. It was exactly 3:37 a.m. I rolled over and looked toward an armchair in the corner of my bedroom. There, sitting flat on the floor beside the chair, was the little girl in the yellow raincoat. She was weeping. I lay there in the dark, feeling a wave of her profound, decades-old sadness wash over me, but I knew better than to feed into it. I turned away, refused to give her the attention she was seeking, and forced myself to go back to sleep. I don't know if she ever leave, but for now, we share the dark. This happened back when I was just starting the 4th grade. Every single day during the summer, our camp would head to the gymnasium to play dodgeball. For 3 years, it was our absolute favorite thing to do. We looked forward to it all day. We usually split the games between a traditional team battle. On this particular afternoon, we chose a free-for-all. I was running round the court, playing alongside a friend of Mina, girl from the camp, whose name I never actually got to learn. It started out as a completely normal, high-energy game, but then, one of the other kids in our class decided to use a classic sneak attack, a tactic most of us used constantly to catch people off guard. Now, standard camp rules strictly prohibited headshots, But in the chaos of the game, this kid threw the ball with everything he had. It slammed directly into the very back of my friend's head. The impact was violent. Her head whipped forward at a horrific 90-degree angle, accompanied by a sickening, loud crack that sounded exactly like someone snapping a thick tree branch under their boot. She collapsed forward head first, the very top of her skull slamming hard against the gym floor. She didn't move. She didn't make a sound. She just lay there, completely limp. The entire gym froze. All the shouting and laughing instantly stopped as 20 kids just stared at her body. Before we could even process what we were looking at, our teacher rushed into the center of the court and frantically ordered all of us out of the gym. We were hurried down the long hallway and locked inside our classroom. Looking out the window, we watched an ambulance, a police car, and a fire truck pull up to the front of the building with their lights flashing. After about 15 agonizing minutes, they drove away. The school never spoke about what happened that day. The girl never returned to camp, and we never saw her again. And from that afternoon on, not a single game of dodgeball was ever played at that school again.